Hey all, it's April 3rd and I thought I would go ahead and make a video explaining the new information that the College Board just released earlier today about the specific format for each of the AP exams. Now, in general, it looks like there are, as recall, this is a 45-minute free response question only. And it looks like there's going to be two free response questions that will basically cover the entire exam, which is going to be a little bit interesting and stressful. Some of the exams, it's one question. Some of the AP exams, of all of the ones that I cover on my video, between calculus, statistics, and all the physics, there are two free response questions that are going to be given on the exam. Now, here's the format of the calculus one, but they're all pretty similar. Generally, question one, you have about 25 minutes to do. You have to do that one. You have to submit your answer to that question. And then you get to access the second question, which you have 15 minutes to do. Once you submit an answer to the first free response question, you cannot go back and modify that question. Okay? I think the main reason they do this is to avoid cheating on the time, because this is going to be a time crunch. Maybe you were thinking, strategizing like, hey, maybe me and a friend, you do question one, I'll do question two, you do question three, and we'll split it up. But you can't do that because you cannot see the second question until you submit your answer for question one. Okay, so this is going to make it harder to cheat. It's also going to make an even tighter time pressure. Maybe one question is harder for you, but you can't borrow time from one question to filter over to the next question. That means if you finish the first question in only 10 minutes, you don't get that extra time on the second question. Each question has their own time associated with it. They're weighted slightly different, and the two questions may or may not be the same. So I'm going to go through each of the exams. If you want to jump to your specific exam, I'm going to go through AP Calculus, ABBC, AP Physics 1, 2, AP Physics C, and AP Statistics. In the description below, I'll have the timestamps to where you can jump to if you're just taking one of the exams, if you don't want to watch the whole video here. So let's start with Calculus A, B, and BC. They're both the same format. You have two questions. You have 25 minutes for the first question, 15 minutes for the second question. Okay? And you have 5 additional minutes for each one of these to upload your question. So that, I don't know if you adds it up, it's going to end up adding up to 50 minutes total because you have 5 minutes to submit your question here. 60% and 40% is the breakdown of the two questions, and they're both multi-focus free response questions. Both questions are very similar to the past AP Calculus exam questions. So good luck for any of you. So it's very fortunate for any of you calculus students. The preparation is going to be very similar to what you've been doing. It's just, you're going to be very pressured on those two questions to do very well. But they're basically similar to the FRQs you've been seeing, minus the topics that have been excluded, which I talked about in the previous video, right? And they list here the units that are excluded. They're also making modifications that you can type in your answers rather than handwriting and taking a picture of it. I strongly discourage this method. Math is something where it's good to have pictures, it's good to write. I really suggest you do this on paper and pencil is my strong suggestion. Don't try to learn a new thing in the process, but they will have the option and the ability to practice entering in equations if you want to ahead of time. But I would just go in with a plan of just doing handwriting. I personally would handwrite everything, or if you have like a stylus and a touchscreen, maybe you could write it on OneNote or something like that, like I do for my videos. You could consider doing that, but I would not try to. You don't want to be stuck in that time pressure, playing around with the equations and stuff like that. The questions are designed to be non-calculator based, like you don't need a graphing calculator. So in some of the free response questions in the past, like usually the first 2 free response questions or first 3, depending on how far back you go, you could use a graphing calculator. In some of the cases, you needed to use a graphing calculator to answer the question. This time, none of the questions will require the use of a graphing calculator, but you can use any calculator you want, pretty much. If you want it, it's there, but I suspect that you can use any calculator you want. It's not like they're going to be able to enforce whether or not you're going to use other calculators. And this brings another point on strategy, is that you could use a calculator, a web-based calculator, if there's one that you like better, right? Maybe you don't like the TI-84 and just playing with that. If you're used to using other tools, you certainly can. But it's all going to be basic enough that you can do it by pencil and paper, just by hand for the most part. But I would still have a calculator ready and know how to use it in case you want to check your answers. Because this is a test that you're going to want to be very, very thorough and use up every minute to make sure that you have double-checked and triple-checked all of your answers. So using a calculator to use that, using another software tool, any of those things would be good things to use to help you make sure you have the right answer. Yeah. So that's kind of the basic. The other thing I would also keep in mind is there's all kinds of calculators out there on the web, like integral calculators that can show you the steps of how to do an integral. Okay, and the College Board and the question writers must be aware of this. So I actually don't expect very many questions you'd actually perform an integral and show your work, because there's so many calculators out there that will just do that for you, right? Like if I were to just Google, as an example, if I were to just Google integral calculator, like here's the integralcalculator.com. I've used this before. And if you wanted to do like the integral of, say, 1 over x dx, or let's do something that's like sine x over cosine x, something that might require u substitution, and you wanted to it, and like this thing shows you the exact steps of how to do it. Do the u substitution, write it out, and everything like that. And then that would be a standard thing. You have to keep in mind that they're trying to gear these questions so that it's hard to cheat, and it would be easy to detect plagiarism. And a standard question that's just doing an integral, like a very basic task, it's like everyone's going to have the same answer. It'd be very hard to distinguish whether or not you have a unique, whether or not it's a unique answer. So like everyone's got the same answer. So if someone cheated, it's really hard to tell. So I don't expect those kinds of tasks that like you're going to integral, you have to do it. I even suspect maybe not even solving a differential equation. I haven't looked this up, but there's probably some easy separation of variables differential equation solvers out there that can solve a differential equation for you. So I may not even expect a question like that, because that is so process oriented that everyone's going to have the same answer, and it's going to be very hard to distinguish whether or not someone's cheating based on that answer. So I'm actually thinking a lot of the questions are going to be framed in a way that it's easier to detect plagiarism or like copied answers for the most part. So I really actually think cheating is going to be extremely difficult on this exam. If you don't know, last week they actually announced that the exam will be open book. Now, you got 25 minutes and 15 minutes. If you're opening and flipping through books, you're a little bit in trouble. That's a waste of time. But what I would suggest is if there are like key points of every major kind of problem, that you put it down on a sheet of paper, like a nice set of notes for yourself that are like, hey, when I come into this kind of problem, this is the approach I should take. What's the slope point form? I don't have to memorize that, tangent lines, normal lines, linear approximations, any process things. For calculus BC, if you're not sure about Euler's method, you can have that as a little table, something that you can easily reference. I recommend that you prepare something like this for yourself to help you remember the different tasks, because you can have notes. There's no way that they're going to check this, and it's not considered cheating. You can have any notes that you want in front of you. I would say the only hard type of cheating that someone might be able to do is to have someone sit with you and just walk you through the exam with the unique answer. I think it's going to be pretty limited, and that's actually going to be a little tougher because most teachers are not like necessarily going to perform great in a time-pressured exam. And even a lot of tutors would struggle with this. You'd have to have someone, if you're going to pay someone, which I don't think you should do, and don't ask me, I'm not going to take your exam for you. Not that any of you would, but you would need someone who's really, really on top of their game at problem solving. And that's not necessarily teachers or people who have been doing calculus a long time necessarily. Good teachers are people who can get you to learn and understand material, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're great at like doing a question really fast and writing it down. That's something I have a personal interest in doing. That's why I make my videos, because I really enjoy problem solving and I like doing them. I like doing them fast. I don't memorize I don't memorize problems and just how to approach them. I break down every problem uniquely because that's how I enjoy doing it. But not every tutor is going to be that good. So you might pay someone, but they may not perform. Or there's a lot of tutors who have a lot of ethics about cheating that maybe they agree or maybe they say, but they turn you in for cheating, right? I know plenty of tutors who have turned in students who have attempted to cheat, contacted their universities, like college students, and then academic investigations opened up into those students. So you don't want to be caught cheating, and so to trust someone to help you out on an exam is very, very, very risky. So I think cheating's going to be. I think a lot of people will try to cheat. Not a lot, but I think there will be a number of people who will try to cheat, and I think a good majority of them will get caught. So that's my general takeaway on that part. All right, let's move on to the next exam I wanted to look at, which was AP Physics 1. 1 and 2. 1 and 2 are the same format, just different material. Very similar to calculus. You have 25 minutes for question 1, 15 minutes for question 2, and just like usual, once you go on to question 2, you cannot go back and look at question 1 again. All right, so this is, even though you have a total of 40 minutes or 45 minutes or 50 minutes, however you count the upload time to do everything, it's really hard line split between question 1 and question 2. You finish question 1 faster, you cannot do question. It doesn't give you more time on question 2. This is where this is going to be highly interesting. The first question is pretty similar to a standard free response question. Qualitative, quantitative translation. That means being able to look at a problem, break it down, and solve it. The free response question is the 2020 QUT question structure. I need to pause. Sorry, I had to pause the video real quick because I realized I hadn't pulled up the exact questions. So as I was saying, the question 1 is the QQT question. It's a qualitative, quantitative translation question. And so I want to give you an example of what that looks like. It's the translate between quantitative, qualitative justification and reasoning. So it's going to have more wording here. It's going to be some equations, but it's going to be some calculations. Looking at last year's exam, the 2019 free response question, it looks like this. It was sort of like, it's a 12-point question typically, and you see the suggested time 12 minutes. It was question 2 on the last year's exam. It's some kind of question that's about, conceptual, about something about the problem. So you have to explain your reasoning without deriving or using equations. You have to explain it using concepts. And then you're going to do some where you're going to do some computation, deriving it. So it's a mix of explaining your answer and deriving an equation, okay? So that's the flavor of the first question. So it's going to look a lot like the question that you had on previous AP Physics 1 exam, except it's just going to be one of these. So you're going to want to practice those kinds of questions from the AP Physics 1. It's usually the second question. It's the 12-point question. That's the one that's going to be here. That's what a QQT question refers to. So that's the first one. The second question is a paragraph argument short answer. And this is like paragraph length responses. So there's sometimes a question like this here. It's usually one of the later questions. It's typically a 7-point question. So it wasn't question 5 last year. It would have been question 4 for the last year, the paragraph 1. So like here, you see on the question 4 exam, in a clear, coherent paragraph length response that may also contain inferior equations, justify blah blah blah. Okay. Now this was an E&M one, but like it's of this style of question. You're gonna be able to do maybe some computation, but there's going to be a section where you have to like kind of write an essay or write out like what you mean, and that's what they mean by the paragraph argument short answer question. That's what that kind of question means. Okay, so they are similar. So the good thing is they're similar to free response questions that you've done before. It's just like from last year's exam, it's irrelevant because this is on a unit that like you didn't need, you're not gonna cover for this year, that they cut from the 2020 examination. So, but this is the question you're looking for. It's usually question 4, 7 points. That's the question format. So that's the one you want to be prepping for. Okay, and so just as usual, you can use a calculator, but like they're just like the calculus exam. Like you don't need to use a graphing calculator, but you should have a calculator. It's probably easier. The numbers, though, and the equations are typically going to just be things that you can do on paper and pencil without a calculator. But I would have a calculator ready. And just like for calculus, you get, like, this is true for all your AP exams. They're open notes. And so I really recommend you kind of create your own notebook of your kinds of things and add formula sheets. I mean, you can use the AP Physics 1 formula sheet or Physics 2 formula sheet. I don't really recommend them. I don't like their equation sheets. I don't really like the way they're laid out. I don't really like the way they write them up. I would write them in the way that you like them. See, this is your chance to write your own equation sheet the way you like it. And it's missing some equations. It's missing the relationship between linear velocity and angular velocity, as an example from the rotation unit, like V equals R omega. So you can add those things to your equation sheets, and you can just put something down on a paper, maybe a couple of pages of paper, not really longer than that, if you need to, you can refer to, you know exactly where to look to help you solve the problem. You don't want to be digging through pages and pages of notes to figure out a problem. That's going to like eat up way too much of your time to be able to do. So that's my recommendation. Physics 2 is kind of the same flavor, just different material, but the exam structure is identical. The Physics 2 one here is same way. It's a QQT question. It's also a paragraph argument short answer question. Just of different material for Physics 2. Okay. So let's move on to Physics C. So Physics C, again, the mechanics and the E&M are very similar in format this year. Again, 2 questions, 25 minutes for the first question, 15 minutes for the second question. You cannot go back to the first question after you've looked at the second question. So you do question 1, you submit it, you then go to question 2. You cannot go back to question 1, as well as you only have the same amount of time. You still only have 15 minutes for question 2. So even if you finish question 1 quickly, it does not buy you more time for question 2. In this case, the questions you have are long free response questions and short free response questions, and there's more detail on it. For the first question, it's going to be analyzing data, like graphical data, representations of physical situations, determine scientific questions and methods, analyze quantitative data and representative graphs, develop an explanation or scientific argument. Okay, that's the first question. And let's look at, like, they consider it a long free response question. With emphasis on analyzing and explaining concepts. They ask you to say, look at question 3 on the 2017 AP Physics 1 exam as an example. So I want to pull that up as an example I have here. Here's an example. It was an angular momentum question from the Physics 1 in 2017. And so they kind of giving you different physicals. They ask you to explain reasoning without equations. They have a student put up an equation. You have to justify whether or not you think it's good or not. You have another student deriving. You have to say if there's any problem with it, and then you have to derive it yourself. And then, so it's all conceptual. So it's tying those conceptual questions with equations. And again, I think they do this because it is much, much harder to cheat, because it will be much more obvious if you copy the exact wording, or even, very similar wording. Even if you change a word here and there, it's going to be obvious that you've done so when you submit your answers. And so that's why I think they've chosen these style of questions for that one. So look at the 2017 AP Physics 1 question number 3 if you want to see an example of what the first question for Physics C is going to be about. And then the second question is a experimental design question. So this is a more standard question that they normally ask on the Physics C exam. You have to come up with a whole experimental design, and they give you an example, the 2012 AP Physics C question 2, which I have here. So this is what your 15-minute question is going to be like. You're to perform an experiment investigating blah, blah, blah. They're going to say what equipment you need, outlining a procedure, give a detailed account of calculations. So you have to really outline an entire experimental procedure, and that is going to be extremely hard to cheat on, right? Because like there's no way that two people are going to use the exact same wording, the exact same setup. You do similar things, but you may describe how you're going to measure things differently. Like there's so many different choices of how you design your experiment that there's no way that in every part you would copy them word for word. So the key part is you're going to use some equations, but it's going to be less numerical problem solving. It's going to be more demonstrating your knowledge of how to set up the experiment and how to do the experiment. And so that's, good or bad, that's just the format, and that's the way the exam needs to be this year. It's going to be less analytical than it had been in previous exams. I believe that pretty well, because most of these, when you look at the example questions they have, it's a lot about reasoning and explaining why something is true, and not like this is the one part where you have to derive something, part D of this question. For the rest of these, you have to reason why these equations make sense or don't make sense. Okay. Let's see. And the last exam I wanted to talk about was the statistics exam. You will have, again, it's 2 questions. It's organized 25 minutes, 15 minutes. They're multi-focus free response questions. So just like all the other exams we were talking about, you can only work on one question at a time. You have to do question 1 first, then you do question 2, and you have hard time limits for each question, so it's not a total time. So you're really short on time. Both questions are kind of standard free response question. It's not like the number 6 question on the AP statistics exam. It's more like the first 5 questions. The traditional statistics exam questions, they're going to be pretty standard. There's no investigative task on this exam. You can use formula sheets that's given, but you can make, like I said, for all the other exams, I've been saying if you skipped over it, what I've been saying is make your own notes, make your own formula sheets, make your own things that you can reference, that you can pull up and look at and work on that makes sense to you, so you know what to do for each kind of topic. You'd be like, what do I care, or how do I word, what's a type 1 error, what's a type 2 error, those kinds of things you want to like concisely put down so that you can explain those very easily. So I if I get requests to put some of those kinds of things together, I can, but I really think this is a personal thing for you to like make sure you organize your thoughts and your study habits so that you know what your note page looks like. If I make one for you, it's very similar in the idea of the AP exam giving you a formula sheet. It's like it wasn't your thought that went into organizing what you need to know, like where are different things located. You don't need to use a graphing calculator for these questions. You should be able to do it in pen and paper. That means I don't expect a lot of computation in terms of finding the p-value and stuff like that. Maybe it has some of those things, but those things are easy to do with formula and on a calculator, or you can either find websites that will do the hypothesis testing for you and outline all the steps. So that's why I don't expect to see that much of it on the exam. I think the key parts, especially if it's a hypothesis testing, is for you to identify what test to use and apply it appropriately, and set up the null and alternative hypothesis and the explanations for everything and all the assumptions that you're making. But you can now create your own notes that say what all those assumptions are to document all the things. So you have a powerful tool in writing your own notes here that you can use to help answer the question. So that's it. You guys have any more questions for me? Drop in the comments below. I will answer them the best I can. But yeah, I'm probably, if you guys have a lot of interest, I can prep some specific I want to get like some specific strategies for each exam, like make a video for each of the exams and talk about specific strategies that I would do to prep for each exam and get ready for it. Just as a yeah, any more questions, just let me know. But good luck on your studying. This is a really hard time. Um, I just want to close with the thought that, like, I know you guys are stressed about your AP exams, and you guys are worried you want to do well, and you're worried about this timing. You're worried about a lot of things. There's a lot of things to worry about right now. But this is a really health and economic crisis for a lot of people. So, there's big picture. These AP exams don't really mean a whole lot in the long run. Like, you get to be my age, the AP exams, I took them so long ago, but it didn't really make a huge impact on me in terms of the outcome. So, focus on the things that help you de-stress. Focus on the things that are important. The people around you, your community, your teachers, the people who are going through very hard times right now, and not to diminish any stress you have on the AP exam itself, for by no means, but just I think it's a wake-up call maybe to take stock of the things that are really important. So do your best, study hard, work hard, get a good score, but at the end of the day, this is not everything. This does not define you. This is not the only thing that getting college credit or any of these things. Like, you tell me, in the long run, it really, really will be a small thing, but the people who are suffering, the people who are dying and losing their jobs, those things are very traumatic. And I know this has been a hard situation for everyone. So just keep that in mind, that, like, this isn't everything for you. So I hope that gives you a sense of peace or relax. Just do your best. It is what it is. You'll do fine, no matter what your score. If it's a 1, if it's a 5, I mean, it in the long run, it's not going to make a huge impact in the trajectory of your life as you might think. Okay, so good luck with your studying, and yeah, I'll see you around.